During the 1960s, African American men called each other brothers, which had a profound unifying effect upon our culture that resulted in that decade's unprecedented unified black protests against the U.S. system of white supremacy. Today, we're now calling ourselves by the N-word, and we're now more divided than at any previous time in history. Furthermore, nowadays within the U.S., whenever a black person stands up and makes a unifying black declaration, there are often those among us who will respond by saying that we should stop using the word black because we're not actually black. Nowadays, whenever a black person stands up and also praises the motherland of Africa, there are often those among us who will respond by saying that we're not from Africa, but we are instead the true indigenous Americans. They do so although countless numbers of us have taken DNA tests that confirms our African identity. Also, nowadays, whenever a black person stands up and speaks of black liberation, there are often those among us who will respond by saying that we should be patient and just wait on Jesus, because as you know, we are the true Jews found within a Bible written by our most ungodly enemies. Therefore, before we can even come together in the interest of truly liberating ourselves, we instead now argue among ourselves over which of these narratives is the true one. Our current confused and the divisive collective state is not some strange occurrence. It is by deliberate design. To understand this fact, you have to ask yourself, who benefits most when black people are divided and confused? The answer is clearly to what oppressors does. Whenever an outcome happens among the oppressed that benefits the oppressors, it is always by deliberate design of the oppressors. White oppressive forces have deliberately spread lots of false information into the black communities. Their monopoly over information that we receive provides them with an unlimited ability to feed fraudulent, divisive propaganda into our community. Those of us that are the most naive and gullible are the easiest victims of those fraudulent propaganda campaigns. It's the true reason why the African American population is now more confused and more divided than at any previous time in history. People's behaviors aligns with what they've been made to believe. Therefore, people can be misled to believe false things that are deliberately designed to change their collective behaviors in ways that negatively impacts their communities. Likewise, white oppressive forces exploit their monopoly over information that we receive, which allows them to control what we believe by spreading false information into our communities that changes our culture in ways that are against our own interests, and instead in ways that serves and protects the system of white supremacy. When it's done gradually over considerable time, people can be fundamentally changed in ways that are against their own self-interest. Moreover, they can be made to believe many things that literally insults their own intelligence. And they will then say the most ridiculous things while wearing a straight face. Furthermore, they will make enemies of anyone who intelligently presents facts proving that their current beliefs are wrong. To our detriment, this is precisely what white oppressive forces have done to the African American culture. It's why millions of African Americans now foolishly believes the false narrative that we made the N-word ours and that using it ridiculously empowers us. It's also why many now becomes offended when called an African, but will smile when called by the N-word. It's also why many now insist that we're not from Africa, but are instead the true indigenous Americans, although countless millions of us have taken DNA analysis, which have scientifically proven our African ancestry. Not only are we drowning in disinformation, we are also drowning in idiotic nonsense. It's why many are now insisting that we should call ourselves the word niggas, because it's an ancient Ethiopian word meaning king, negating the fact that it sounds very much like the derogatory N word. That makes as much sense as learning that the word shit was an ancient word meaning king, and then thinking that that presents a good reason to now therefore call ourselves shit. Our people are drowning in idiotic ideologies. It's also why many are now sagging their pants, glorifying pimps, routinely calling our women by the B word and the H word. Although countless millions of African Americans have normalized these noted behaviors, there's nothing normal nor even remotely intelligent about any of these noted behaviors. Our culture has been deliberately negatively socially engineered by white oppressive forces. They have the motive, the opportunity, and the means to negatively change our culture, and they did so. Then to cover it up, they spread the Willie Lynch myth into our communities. That silly myth is being used to keep us distracted from learning the truth of our plight and condition. We must learn the truth, because if our understandings of our plight and condition remains flawed, then all of our liberating strategies and remedies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. This is why those of us who know the truth must teach. African proverb. To learn the truth of our current plight and condition, we have to start at the 1960s. During the 1960s, African Americans' unified protest against the U.S. system of white supremacy was extraordinary, and it still remains unrivaled by any other group in U.S. history. African Americans confronted the U.S. system of white supremacy on all fronts. It was confronted through civil disobedience tactics, militant means, nonviolent protests, and with black lawyers pleading for equality within America's highest Supreme Court. African Americans had unknowingly proven themselves as being the greatest threat against the U.S. system of white supremacy. That fact was even declared by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who said that the American Negro presented the greatest threat against the preservation of the nation's system of white supremacy. Although the government publicly professes equality for all citizens, it's actually secretly unrelentingly committed to the preservation of its nation's white social dominance and social capital. Therefore, given that African Americans were identified as being the greatest threat against the preservation of the U.S. system of white supremacy, it was logically determined that the African American culture had to be fundamentally changed from what it was. They made change with the African American culture that would subdue the threat that African Americans represented. It was decided around 1968 that this threat that they then called the Negro problem could be subdued by deploying an ideological subversion system against the African American population. Ideological subversion is an offensive psychological warfare tactic that uses disinformation, misinformation, and unrelenting fraudulent propaganda campaigns to change a targeted population in ways that are against their own interests and in ways serving those who are deploying the ideological subversion system. During the late 1960s, white oppressive forces deployed this ideological subversion system against the African American population in response to that decade's unprecedented unified black protests that emerged with the Black Power movement. This ideological subversion system has fundamentally changed the African American culture in ways that served and protects the U.S. system of white supremacy. It's the true reason why the African American population is now more confused, self-loathing, and more divided than at any previous time in history. to not have deployed this ideological subversion system against the African American population would have placed the U.S. government diametrically against its own self-interest. Once false ideologies have been spread into our communities, millions of us then start imitating and following them because of what's called the herd mentality. The herd mentality is a tendency for people's behavior or beliefs to conform to those of the groups which they belong to, regardless of how ridiculous those beliefs may be. Yes, even intelligent people can be made to engage in idiotic behaviors when everyone else around them appears to also be doing so. Decide to get us all caught up by the N-word, which is the idiotic belief. The reason why you're learning this truth from some random black guy on a social media platform instead of from our black leaders is because we no longer have true black leaders. Our true black leaders have been assassinated, and they've been replaced by black puppet leaders who actually, in fact, works on behalf of the white establishment. The system of white supremacy now works like a well-oiled machine. White oppressive forces are playing chess while most black people aren't even playing checkers. Most black people are instead playing hopscotch. Because the name of this disclosed ideological subversion system remains classified, those of us who knows of it has appropriately named it the Black People's Matrix. Welcome to the real world. When you hear the truth, and you know deep down within your soul that you've heard the truth, and yet you still refuse to accept and act upon it, it is proof then that you are among the mentally enslaved ones. Even though this task ahead of us is a daunting one, we must still rise to the occasion. Upon receiving the truth, it is all of our duties to share it unrelentingly. We must teach the truth, even though millions of our people have been brainwashed to hate those of us who now teaches it. We must teach the truth whether it fills the room or clears it out. We must post the truth whether we're blocked for it or unfriended for it. We must teach the truth regardless of the consequences, because we are called to free the minds of those who wants to be free, not to appease those that have been brainwashed to act as wardens of their own mental prisons. Welcome to the real world. I'd rather have my life shortened for standing up and telling the truth than to live a long life as a mentally enslaved fool. I sincerely believe it's better to die on my feet telling the truth than to live a long life on my knees being mentally enslaved by our oppressors. Brothers and sisters, it's time to learn the truth, speak the truth, share the truth. Stop functioning based upon lies. As long as you function based upon mentally enslaved lies, you will remain mentally enslaved by the white society. Once you accept the truth, the emancipation of your mind begins. Stop believing in dumb shit that insults your own intelligence. One love and peace. Time to wake up.